It started with a text that didn't make sense. Just 2 words. Haha. Nothing else. No context. No emoji. Just that. I remember staring at it, confused, until a second notification popped up on my phone. It was from the bank, a withdrawal alert, then another, and another. Within seconds, my stomach dropped. I opened the app, and there it was. Balance. 0. For a moment, I just froze. I thought maybe the bank had glitched, maybe it was a system error. But as I scrolled through the transactions, my chest started to tighten. Every single dollar I had ever saved. Gone. I checked again, my hands shaking so hard I could barely tap the screen. The last transfer went straight into an account under my father's name. My parents'. It didn't feel real. This was the money I'd worked for since I was 16. Every babysitting gig, every scholarship check, every weekend shift at the diner, all of it, gone in seconds. And that text, that stupid suddenly felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I called my mom first. The phone rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. I tried again. This time, she picked up but didn't say anything. I could hear faint voices in the background, laughter, glasses clinking, like they were out celebrating. My voice cracked as I asked, "Mom, where's the money? What happened to our account?" There was a pause, just long enough for my heart to start pounding. Then she said, "Sweetheart, don't worry about it. We needed it. You'll understand one day, understand?" I couldn't even breathe. I said her name again, begging for an explanation, but before I could finish, she sighed and said something I'll never forget. "You're young. You'll make more. We deserve a little break." And then, in the background, my father laughed, that same deep laugh I used to love as a kid. Only now, it made my skin crawl. I remember staring at the wall, trying to make sense of it, trying to believe this wasn't happening. I opened the messages again, scrolling up to see if I'd missed something, if this was all a sick joke. But all I saw was that same text. Ha ha. Like they were mocking me. The silence in my apartment felt heavier with every passing second. My phone slipped from my hand, and I just sat there, listening to the hum of the fridge, the faint traffic outside. Everything around me looked exactly the same, but nothing felt the same anymore. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every memory, every moment they told me to trust them, every lecture about honesty and family. The irony was cruel. They didn't just take my savings. They took something I couldn't replace, my faith in them. When the sun finally rose, I called again. This time, my father answered. I didn't even get a word out before he chuckled and said, "You'll thank us later," and hung up. For a few seconds, I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. My face looked pale, unfamiliar. I didn't cry. I just whispered the only thing I could manage. "What did you just do to me?" Somewhere, deep down, I already knew the answer. And that was the moment everything inside me began to change. Before everything fell apart, I used to think I was the perfect daughter, the kind every parent would be proud of. I studied hard, never got into trouble, and worked every spare hour I could manage. While my friends spent their weekends partying, I spent mine pouring coffee, folding uniforms, and saving every dollar. I believed hard work and honesty could build anything. And my parents, they made me believe they were proud of that. Mom used to smile whenever I showed her my savings balance. She'd say things like, "You're so responsible, honey. You're not like other kids." Those words used to fill me with warmth. I thought we were a team, that everything I did was for our family's future. Dad would pat my shoulder and say, We'll always look after you. I didn't know those same words would one day echo like a threat. When I turned 18, they suggested opening a joint account. It'll help us keep track, Mom said. You can learn about managing real finances. I agreed without hesitation. It felt like a milestone, proof they trusted me as an adult. Back then, I didn't question anything. I signed where they told me to, proud to be included in something grown up. I didn't realize I'd just handed them the keys to my future. Looking back now, I can see the small cracks I ignored. The way Dad would brush off my questions about withdrawals, saying, "It's just bills, relax." Or the way Mom would change the topic whenever I asked about statements. But I trusted them. I always trusted them, because that's what family is supposed to mean. I still remember birthdays at our old dining table, the smell of cinnamon candles, Mom's laughter, the way Dad always gave me a card with some small amount of cash tucked inside. I used to think those moments were love, but now, when I think about them, I wonder if they were rehearsals, a perfect little show to make sure I stayed loyal, obedient, and blind. There's something cruel about realizing your happiest memories might not be real, like finding out your favorite song was written by someone who never believed a word of it. Every memory feels tainted now. Every hug, every smile, every promise. After that text, I couldn't stop thinking about those moments. They haunted me. So I did the only thing I could. I started digging. I found old folders on my mom's laptop, ones I'd never noticed before. Tax records, statements, documents with my name in places it didn't belong. My pulse quickened as I scrolled through page after page, confusion twisting into dread. That's when I saw it. A transaction from 2 years ago, signed in my name, for a loan I never took. My own signature, forged in their handwriting. My hands started trembling, and all I could whisper was, "What else did you do?" I couldn't shake the image of that forged signature. It didn't just look like mine. It felt like a violation, like someone had reached into my chest and stolen something invisible. I spent the next few nights in silence, surrounded by papers, screens, and the cold blue glow of my laptop. My apartment looked like an evidence board, receipts scattered on the floor, highlighter marks bleeding across numbers that didn't make sense. Every discovery led to another. Every answer peeled back another lie. At first, it was little things. Transfers that seemed harmless, $50 here, $100 there. Descriptions labeled as family groceries or car repairs. But as I kept scrolling, the pattern grew. Thousands over the years, all chipped away quietly while I believed I was building a future. I had been their savings account, their safety net. I found messages between my parents, hidden in an old email chain I wasn't supposed to see. My mom had written, "She won't notice. Just move it slowly." My dad replied, "She trusts us too much." I stared at those words until the screen blurred. That was the moment my confusion started to burn into anger, the kind that doesn't explode. It simmers, steady and deep, until it becomes something else entirely. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't go inside. I just sat across the street, watching through the windshield as they carried on like nothing had happened. My mom hanging laundry, my dad sipping coffee in the driveway. They looked so normal, so ordinary. And yet, every movement felt staged now, every smile rehearsed. I realized they hadn't changed. I had. The truth had peeled the mask off everything. That night, I went back to the paperwork. I searched my name on every document I could find. Loan portals, bank apps, property databases, anything that could carry a trace of me. And then I saw it. A mortgage statement tied to an address I knew too well. Our family home, the house I grew up in, the one filled with Christmas lights and birthday balloons. Except now, next to the owner's name, was mine, my credit, my identity, my signature, again, copied, reshaped, stolen. The reality hit like ice water down my spine. They hadn't just taken my money, they'd taken my name and used it as a shield for their debts. Every late payment, every interest charge, every reckless decision, all of it now lived under me. My hands started to tremble as I scrolled through the details. It was all there, the date they signed, the amount they borrowed, even the payment schedule. And somewhere between the numbers and the forged initials, I heard something. A memory. My father's voice, laughing as he once said, "Don't worry, kiddo. We've got everything under control." That laugh echoed in my head, looping endlessly until I shut the laptop and whispered, "Not anymore." The drive to their house felt longer than it ever had before. Every mile seemed to stretch, every turn heavier than the last. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I rehearsed what I would say, how I'd demand answers, but the moment I pulled into their driveway, the words dissolved. The place looked exactly the same, the trimmed hedges, the welcome mat that said "Home Sweet Home," but nothing about it felt like home anymore. I rang the bell, and my father opened the door as if he'd been expecting me. He didn't look surprised, just calm, too calm. He gave a small smile and said, "You finally decided to come talk, huh?" That tone, smug, rehearsed, made my chest tighten. Inside, my mother sat on the couch with a tissue in her hand, already in tears. But they weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of irritation, like I'd ruined a peaceful afternoon. I started slow, my voice shaking. "Why did you do it? Why take everything I worked for?" My father leaned back in his chair and sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "We didn't take it," he said. "We managed it." It's the same thing he said it, like it was obvious, like I was a child too young to understand adult logic. My mom chimed in softly. "We raised you. Do you know how much we sacrificed? You should be grateful we used that money responsibly." Grateful. That word hit me harder than I expected. My entire body went cold. "You forged my name," I whispered. "You used my credit to pay for your debts." My father's eyes didn't even flicker. "We deserved it," he said flatly. "After all we did for you, it's only fair." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just looked at them, at the people who'd held me when I was sick, who'd cheered at my graduation, who'd promised they'd always protect me. And now, standing in front of me, they looked like strangers wearing my parents' faces. I realized then that I wasn't their daughter anymore. Maybe I never really had been. When I raised my voice, they turned it around on me. My mom started crying louder, accusing me of being dramatic, ungrateful, cruel. My father told me I was too emotional to see the truth. Every word they said pushed me further away from the people I thought I knew. The air in that house felt poisonous. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. The door clicked shut behind me, and for a long moment I just stood on the porch, staring at the quiet street, trying to steady my breathing. My heart felt like it was splitting open. Grief, rage, disbelief, all at once. Then I whispered the only thing I could manage, so low I barely heard it myself. "You'll regret this." Revenge doesn't start with rage. It starts with silence, with stillness so sharp it cuts through the noise. After that night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat at my kitchen table, staring at the stack of papers I'd taken from their house when they weren't looking. Bank statements, tax files, copies of loan forms. Proof that my life had been rewritten behind my back. Sleep disappeared. Days blurred together. I lived between spreadsheets and coffee cups, tracing every number like a detective chasing a ghost. Every transaction had a story. A dinner here, a hotel there, a shopping spree tagged as maintenance expense. The more I looked, the more patterns I found. Vacations I'd never taken, jewelry I'd never owned, payments to places that didn't fit our life. And every path, every trail, led back to them. My parents had turned deception into an art form. My mother's gentle words, my father's calm reassurances, they weren't kindness. They were camouflage. Behind every, "Don't worry, we've got it covered," was another withdrawal, another transfer, another lie. I started keeping a journal, not for my emotions, but for evidence. Dates, account numbers, signatures. I wrote until my hand cramped. There was something strangely comforting about the order of it, the logic. It made me feel in control again, even if only in fragments. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was the person who was going to expose them. One night, as I was going through an old flash drive my father used to keep in his desk, I found something buried deep in a folder labeled insurance, a file that didn't belong. It was a password-protected document, and it took me hours to crack it open. When I finally did, I froze. Inside was a list of transactions, offshore accounts, transfers to names I didn't recognize, luxury club memberships, all of it under my father's name, funded through money that had once been mine. The shock didn't hit me this time, just a quiet, steady resolve. It was no longer about betrayal. It was about justice, about balance. If they'd taught me anything, it was how to be thorough. I gathered everything, screenshots, files, signatures, and receipts, and stored them in a hidden folder labeled Project Clean Slate. It sounded cold, but that's what I'd become. Cold, focused, methodical. When I finally pushed my chair back and looked around, the first light of morning was spilling through the window. My apartment looked like a war room, papers spread across every surface. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "I'll get it all back. Every dollar. Every truth." But I knew I couldn't do it alone. It was time to find someone who understood exactly how to bring people like them down, legally, painfully, and publicly. I didn't know where to start, so I searched online for lawyers who specialized in financial fraud. Most of the websites felt cold, corporate, impersonal. Then I found one name that stood out, Maya Ellis. Her reviews were filled with words like compassionate and fierce. I didn't know what I was walking into, but something about her tone in the first phone call made me feel like maybe, for once, someone would actually listen. The day I met her, I brought everything. Folders, printouts, a flash drive, even a notebook covered in coffee stains and scribbled notes. I must have looked exhausted. Maya greeted me with a steady smile and a cup of tea instead of a handshake. "Start from the beginning," she said gently. "Take your time." So I did. I told her everything, from the haha text, to the forged documents, to the hidden accounts. She didn't interrupt once. When I finally stopped talking, she sat in silence for a moment, flipping through the papers I'd brought. Then she looked up and said 5 words that changed everything. "What they did is fraud." The word hung in the air, heavier than I expected. Fraud. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a crime. Something real, measurable, punishable. For the first time in months, the fog inside my head started to clear. There was a path forward, and it didn't involve screaming or begging. It involved strategy. Maya began outlining the steps we could take. File a formal complaint. Submit the forged documents for verification. Freeze their assets before they could move the money again. Her calm, methodical tone gave me a strange sense of comfort. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had someone who understood how to turn pain into action. As we built the case, I learned just how deep my parents' deceit went. Maya helped me trace transfers I'd missed, showing me how they'd hidden money through small business accounts and property titles. The more I uncovered, the more it felt like watching a slow-motion explosion, years of trust collapsing piece by piece. Late one evening, as we reviewed property records online, I noticed a familiar address, the house I grew up in. But the listed owner wasn't my father anymore. It was my cousin. I blinked, thinking it was a mistake, but the dates told the story. The transfer had happened just days after our confrontation. My parents weren't panicking. They were planning. I felt my stomach twist as the reality sank in. They knew I was coming. They were already covering their tracks. Maya looked at me over the edge of her glasses, her voice steady but sharp. Then we moved faster. That night, walking back to my car, I felt the first flicker of something dangerous. Not fear, not sadness, but focus. The kind that burns slow and cold. The game had officially begun. It started quietly, a few distant relatives reaching out, pretending to check in. Their messages all sounded the same, sweet concern laced with judgment. "We heard what's happening. Are you sure you're not misunderstanding your parents? You know how hard they worked for you. You're breaking the family apart." At first, I tried to explain. I told them about the forged loans, the fake signatures, the stolen accounts, but I could hear it in their voices. Disbelief, disappointment. They weren't listening. They were defending the image, not the truth. My parents had always been masters of perception, and now their performance was in full swing. Within days, their version of the story spread like wildfire. I was the ungrateful daughter, the spoiled child who turned on her parents. I'd misunderstood the finances, overreacted, embarrassed them. It was almost impressive how fast they built their defense. I could picture my mother's trembling voice rehearsed to perfection. We only ever wanted what was best for her, and my father's calm, authoritative tone sealing the lie. But cracks began to show. My aunt accidentally let it slip that my parents had been sorting out property paperwork months ago, the same paperwork Maya had uncovered. My cousin stopped answering my texts altogether. The silence from their side of the family grew heavy, calculated. I knew what that meant. They were choosing their loyalty, and it wasn't to me. Then the messages started. At first, they were vague. "You don't know what you're doing. This will ruin everything." I thought they came from a blocked number until I noticed the tone. Familiar, clipped, deliberate. My father's. Then one arrived from his actual phone. "Stop before you regret it." That was the moment the fear began to settle in my bones. Not panic, but the quiet awareness of danger. Every sound in my apartment felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the vibration of my phone, the click of footsteps in the hallway. I started recording everything, calls, conversations, even the silence between them. Maya told me to stay calm, to document but not respond. "Fear is what they want," she said. "Don't give it to them." But it wasn't fear that kept me awake at night. It was the realization that the people I once called Mom and Dad were now strategizing against me like enemies in a courtroom. Every smile they ever gave me replayed in my head, hollow now, masks over motives. Then one night, as I was reviewing evidence, a new voicemail appeared. No number, no caller ID. Just a familiar voice, low and deliberate. "You think you're smarter than us? You'll see how this ends." I stared at the screen for a long time, listening to it again and again. Then, for the first time in months, I smiled. Because he was right. He would see how this ends, just not the way he thought. It began with a single message from Maya. They took the bait. Weeks of planning had led to this, a meticulously crafted illusion that looked like an opportunity too tempting for my parents to resist. A private buyer interested in purchasing one of the properties they were trying to move under my cousin's name. The buyer, of course, didn't exist. The meeting, the contracts, even the agents, all of it was part of the trap. We rented a small, sunlit office downtown, the kind of place that smelled faintly of new paint and coffee. Hidden cameras blinked from the corners, microphones tucked inside potted plants and beneath the glossy table. Maya and I sat in an unmarked car a block away, watching the live feed flicker on her tablet. My pulse refused to slow. "They'll show up," Maya whispered, eyes fixed on the screen. "People like them always do." And she was right. At 3:17 p.m., my father entered first. Pressed suit, sunglasses, the quiet arrogance of a man who thought he was untouchable. My mother followed moments later, her expression tight but eager, clutching the folder of falsified documents we had been waiting to see. As they sat across from the undercover agent posing as the buyer, I watched every move, every practiced smile. My father spoke smoothly, explaining how his daughter had agreed to the sale. He used my name casually, like currency. My stomach turned as I saw him slide the forged signature page across the table. My name in perfect imitation, written by his hand. Maya glanced at me. "That's it. We've got them." But I couldn't look away. For all the rage, all the betrayal, a part of me still wanted to believe this wasn't real, that the people on the screen were imposters wearing my parents' faces. Yet every lie, every self-assured sentence, made that illusion crumble. When my mother leaned forward, whispering, "Let's finish this before she finds out," something inside me hardened. There it was, the confession we needed. I met Maya's eyes and nodded once. Through the microphone, she spoke quietly to the officers waiting outside. "Move in." The next moments felt like a movie playing in slow motion. The door burst open, voices shouting, chairs scraping. My mother froze mid-sentence. My father's confident expression shattered into disbelief. Papers scattered across the table like broken promises. From the car, I watched as they were led out in handcuffs. My mother's face was drained of color, her mouth open in shock. My father didn't speak. He just stared ahead, jaw tight, eyes burning with something between fury and shame. I should have felt victorious. After all, justice was finally happening, legally, visibly, irrevocably. But as the police cars drove away, I felt an ache I couldn't name. The people being taken away weren't just criminals. They were the ghosts of who I thought my parents were. Maya placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's over," she said softly. I nodded, but I knew better. Justice had begun. But peace was still a long way off. Chapter 9. Courtroom Ghosts. 490 words. The courtroom smelled like paper, coffee, and quiet tension. Every sound, the shuffle of files, the tap of a pen, the murmur of voices, felt too loud. I sat behind the witness table, my palms pressed flat against my knees, trying to steady the tremor that had lived in me for months. My parents were just a few feet away, yet they felt like strangers sitting in borrowed skin. When the trial began, the truth unfolded piece by piece, like the peeling of old wallpaper revealing mold beneath. Bank records, forged signatures, transfers labeled as family support. My name written on documents I'd never seen. Every exhibit felt like another memory being erased. I'd grown up believing they'd do anything to protect me. Now, all I could think was how carefully they'd planned to use me. My father sat stone-faced beside his lawyer, hands folded neatly, pretending to be the reasonable one. My mother looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders curved inward, her eyes darting anywhere but at me. They whispered to each other occasionally, lips tight, as if blaming one another might undo what they'd done. When my turn came to testify, the room seemed to shrink. I told them about the missing money, the fake loans, the property under my name. I spoke slowly, each word like a piece of glass leaving my throat. Maya stood beside me, her presence solid, grounding. At one point, my mother began to cry, loud, broken sobs that made the room shift uncomfortably, but I could tell the tears weren't guilt. They were anger that I'd brought their secrets into the light. My father reached over, touched her arm, and whispered something. I didn't need to hear it to know what it was. Don't give her the satisfaction. The prosecution's voice filled the silence. This wasn't an accident, he said, turning toward the jury. It was a pattern. A lifetime of control, disguised as love. When the judge finally began to read the verdict, the air went still. My heartbeat drowned everything else out. Guilty. The word felt both heavy and light at once. Guilty of fraud, guilty of forgery, guilty of betrayal dressed as family duty. My mother let out a sharp breath, a sound like something tearing. My father just closed his eyes, jaw locked tight, as if the sentence were an inconvenience rather than justice. They were ordered to repay what they'd stolen and serve time. But no number of years could measure what they took from me. As the gavel struck, I realized my hands had stopped shaking. For the first time in years, I felt air fill my lungs fully. When I stepped outside, sunlight hit my face. Blinding, honest, almost too real. The courthouse doors closed behind me with a heavy thud. It was over. And yet, as I stood there in the light, I couldn't help but wonder what was left of me after surviving people who'd once called me their daughter. Months passed like slow-moving shadows. The trial headlines faded, the gossip softened, and yet the silence that followed felt heavier than the noise ever did. The house I grew up in, the one with the creaky porch and the oak tree out front, was sold at auction. I didn't go. I couldn't. Seeing strangers walk through rooms that once held my laughter would have been too much. Relatives stopped calling, some out of discomfort, others out of quiet resentment. To them, I wasn't the victim. I was the one who shamed the family, who couldn't just let things stay buried. I learned to stop explaining. Silence, I realized, was its own kind of peace. I rented a small apartment with peeling paint and a view of nothing but rooftops, and somehow it felt like freedom. I worked long hours again, 2 jobs, sometimes 3. But this time, every deposit went into an account with one name on it. Mine. No joint access, no shared promises, just me and the numbers I earned. Nights were hardest. I'd lie awake and hear echoes. My father's calm voice explaining family trust, my mother's soft laughter at dinner. The memories still came, but they couldn't control me anymore. They were ghosts, and I'd learned to live with ghosts. One afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly, my mother's looping script. I opened it with shaking hands. The message was short, barely a page, filled with half-hearted apologies that felt more like guilt management than remorse. And then, at the end, 2 words. Ha ha. Remember? For a long moment, I just stared at it, the paper trembling between my fingers. Then I struck a match, watched the flames crawl across the page, and whispered, "Yes." I remember a year can change everything. The anger that once kept me awake has turned into something quieter. Purpose. The noise of betrayal faded into focus, and from the wreckage, I built something new. I called it the Reclaim Project, a small foundation that helps victims of financial abuse rebuild their lives. People who trusted the wrong hands, just like I did. Each story I hear reminds me how easily love can disguise control, how healing begins when truth finally has a voice. My apartment is still small, my life still simple, but it's mine. Every morning I wake up, make coffee, and check messages from people I've helped. Mothers, students, retirees, all trying to start over. Their words remind me that my revenge isn't about destruction, it's about restoration, about turning what broke me into something that protects others. One evening, I walked down to the pier. The air was cool, salt-touched, alive. I watched the sun sink into the water, the sky melting into gold and crimson. For the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted. I didn't need to look back. Justice had already been served, not in the courtroom, but in the quiet strength that came after. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from an unknown number. One word. Sorry. No name, no explanation, but I didn't need one. I just stood there for a moment, staring at the word that once held power over me, and felt nothing. Then I smiled, pressed delete, and slipped my phone away. The ocean kept moving, the wind brushed against my face, and I realized the truth I'd been chasing all along. Revenge wasn't about ending someone else. It was about beginning again. When betrayal comes from the people who raised you, revenge becomes less about payback and more about taking back the life they tried to steal.